Hello, everybody. How you doing? Let's get started. So this shouldn't be too long, though I'll take any questions anybody has. I have a short agenda here, and I'm going to go in no particular order. So first up, a few people are wondering whether they might have done a virtual inspection in Houston in the last week or two or month, and Bristol-Myers just didn't disclose it to us on the conference call. I think the odds of that are basically 0%. It would be ridiculous that they would go out of their way to disclose that the FDA has said we have to inspect and we have not scheduled anything yet, but then fail to tell us, oh, they did do a virtual inspection and that might have been okay. So don't bank on a virtual inspection having happened and they just didn't disclose it to us. Virtually 0%. The next thing I'd like to talk about is how the next 3 days should play out. So in non-COVID times, a cellular therapy like this would be approved many weeks early. The other two CAR Ts were approved 5 or 6 weeks early. And even the CAR T in July that was approved, I believe, 3 weeks early. But that was not inspected. That was already at a plant that had a previous inspection. So it's hard to rectify that we're now getting to the PDUFA date and still being encouraged that an approval is coming when historically all of these things happen much earlier. Now, of course, the inspection here in Bothell didn't happen until 5 to 6 weeks before the PDUFA date. So you weren't going to get an early approval without that inspection. I don't know exactly how to handicap the odds of different things happening, whether it's Thursday or Friday or Monday or Tuesday. The best I can do is tell you this. All 3 cellular therapies were press released by the FDA. So when an FDA approves a drug, it can either go straight to the sponsor, tell them, and then the sponsor releases it to the market. Or the FDA, if they think the drug is important enough, they put out a press release. And usually, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, that press release comes before the company has time to issue their own press release. So in theory, you could get a press release at any point today, tomorrow, or Monday saying that this drug has been approved. Now, this drug is third to market for the indication it's being approved for. As I've talked about many times, I think it's differentiated, but it is third to market. So I don't know whether the FDA will deem this as important enough to issue a press release. I think they would and will, especially because they want to trumpet that they're approving breakthrough designation oncology drugs during COVID. So my base case is still that the FDA press releases it. If we get to Monday, what could happen? So originally I thought a deferral would happen days or weeks in advance. But if you look at what happened with SPPI, they said they got the deferral notice, I believe, the day before the PDUFA or the weekend of the PDUFA. Also, a previous company that had a deferral, not for inspections in the beginning of September, they did not signal to the market before the PDUFA date that they were going to be deferred. So it's hard to know if the FDA would tell Bristol-Myers officially in a paper form weeks in advance, and or they would tell them the day of. I don't know how to handicap that. I do think that if we got to Monday night and we have not heard anything, I would be particularly concerned because this is not like ozanimod, where ozanimod, they weren't going to press release. The FDA was never going to press release it. And companies regularly do report approvals the next morning when they have a PDUFA date. But here, if you think there's a decent chance, better than 50%, that if this is approved, the FDA is the one that's going to press release it. If the FDA doesn't press release it by the market close on Monday or by 5 p.m., I would say Eastern on Monday, you have to then discount the odds of that happening. What are my odds for all these 3 different things? And how am I thinking about it today? So this is so puzzling, and I know all of you think the same. I have a very hard time getting away from the fact that I think this is going to be approved next week. But in order to believe this is going to be approved next week, you have to believe that Bristol-Myers is not in the know, and you have to blatantly disregard what they're telling you. So let me explain. So this week, a friend of mine and Bristol-Myers is doing investor relations calls with dozens of investors. So this is nothing new, but they're saying different kind of nuanced different things to different investors. But the call that happened this week, the investor relations professional said that you should assume that the language in the 10Q about needing to inspect and haven't inspected is current. So the way I interpret that is the FDA has reiterated to them as of 2 weeks ago that they need to inspect, they can't inspect, period. What's encouraging, though, is, as I said previously, we have examples, I can't name them to you, but a consultant told us that multiple companies got this letter, need to inspect, can inspect, and they rectified it and still got approved. So either there was no inspection or they did a virtual inspection or whatever. But we know that this situation has happened before. But to own this, you have to believe that Bristol Myers is currently not on the know. So why would the FDA not tell Bristol Myers 3 days before the approval that they're going to waive the inspection? Well, there's a few options. They're not going to waive the inspection. That's one option. And that would seem to be the most logical option, right? Bristol Myers is saying they need to inspect, they can't inspect, they're not going to inspect, and they're not going to approve next week. The second option is the FDA hasn't decided yet. The FDA is sitting internally trying to figure out what to do here. And the third option is the FDA just isn't that communicative when it comes to something like this. And if you look at the previous examples, I do not believe that those companies were given a heads up ahead of the PDUFA date that they were going to be approved if they hadn't been inspected. Now, it's very vague because I can't even tell you the names of the drugs. So all of this stuff has to be taken with a grain of salt. And it's not as good as if I can tell you an exact comp and this is the date it happened, and this is the date they got the letter, and so forth and so on. But it all comes back to, why did they inspect Bothell? Why did they send somebody from Maryland in the middle of October to inspect this plant if A, it was going to get a CRL before the plant inspection, and B, they had no game plan to figure out what to do with Houston? The only way you can get around this is if you think that the FDA was willing to send someone to Bothell and have no answer with how they're going to conclude this application indefinitely after that. And that to me seems like a really tough pill to swallow, because we know they're not sending out inspectors to inspect just for the sake of it. We know this from the SPPI situation. We know this from another drug announced this weekend that they have a PDUFA coming up. It's not an important drug, and they're not getting inspected. And we know this from BMYRT and other drugs that have gotten rejected where they didn't inspect. So that seems far-fetched to me. So then what else could have happened? They had a scheduled inspection for Houston, and either COVID ramped too high, or they had to pull inspectors for the vaccine. So let's look at each one of those individually. COVID was already pretty high in Houston in the middle of October. And by the end of October, it ticked up, but it wasn't, 2-3x. Yes, now Texas is in pretty bad shape, but it definitely wasn't some sort of hockey stick jump in new daily cases or percent positive rate. We were monitoring it from when the Bothell inspection started to when, the end of October. You would assume that the FDA wasn't going to wait until the first week of November, let's say, to inspect Bothell, that close to the PDUFA date. When they inspected, inspect Houston, that close to the PDUFA date. They inspected Bothell, I actually believe it was back in October, like 8th or something like that. So it was a good 6 weeks before the PDUFA date. So I don't think that is logical, that the FDA had a scheduled inspection, it got too risky, and they canceled it. The other side is the vaccine inspections. And I have no way of really handicapping that. They were able to send this woman and the local agent to Bothell. So I don't know why they'd be able to do that, but they couldn't send just 2 people to Houston, given, they have enough resources, I would think, given there's no other breakthrough designation oncology drugs or breakthrough designation drugs, period, that are looking to be approved, I think, between now and the end of the year. There might be, I shouldn't say that, there could be breakthrough designated drugs, but I doubt that they are either oncology or They might be something in a plant where the plant's already been inspected, so the plant inspection is important. My point is that there's nothing under the umbrella of cellular and gene therapy, which is CBER, not CEDAR, that has a dying, pressing need for inspectors. But okay, let's say that's the situation. So they just couldn't schedule it, and because of the vaccine stuff. That wouldn't last 2 months. You know, the vaccine inspections take 3 to 5 days, and it's not dozens of plants. And in theory, those vaccines were being manufactured all summer in preparation for a positive readout. So, you know, it's my understanding that the compliance from the FDA monitoring these plants, they're doing it in real time to look at the data and the batches that come out virtually. So I just don't really buy that. So then what do you got? Did something bad happen in Bothell? Was Bothell so bad that they decided they didn't want to send anyone to Houston because, you know, they're going to CRL it? Well, I have 2 points to that seem extremely unlikely. I don't see how Bristol Myers would have went through the entire conference call and the 10Q when all they do is like to tell us about risks when it comes to the CVR, and they don't say one line in the 10Q about a risk of manufacturing CRL or a risk of manufacturing inspections going poorly. And by then, they would have already had all their Form 483s, of course, and they would have known if something was possibly going to derail this from a CRL perspective. I'm not saying they would have known for certain, but they definitely would have known if there was some issues, and the issues were big enough that they should disclose. And certainly, Salmon in the conference call would not have been responded saying, genuinely, he's very happy with the way everything's going. He would have said, we're not going to comment on our discussions with the FDA. And he didn't say that. So it seems rather unlikely a CRL is coming. I would, you know, how would I pinpoint the odds? I don't know, but, you know, sub 10%. So, you know, you then have to ask, the FDA has to have a plan here. So if they do decide they're going to defer this, and they're going to defer this for inspection, then what do they do? Because they won't be able to inspect Houston for at least 3 months on the ground if it's a COVID risk. Now, if it was just a vaccine resource risk, sure, maybe they'd be able to inspect in the next month. I just find that extremely unlikely that that's the reason. In fact, the company said on the call that they're mindful of the FDA employees' safety. They reiterated that this time. They didn't talk about there being vaccine resource risk. So Houston's surging right now. So they're not sending anybody into Texas anytime soon. Now, if the FDA doesn't have a plan, it's going to look terrible. This will eventually be on the front page of, you know, Washington Post, where FDA indefinitely delays oncology breakthrough designation drug because they can't fly into Houston. And this isn't even where the drug's manufactured. This is just where the vector's made. So let's talk about that a little bit. And there's been some good work done on this by other people, not me. But most of it's been done by sheep. So this vector is made in a Lonza facility in Houston. They've never confirmed that, but that's what it is. So Lonza also makes a vector for one or both of the other CAR Ts. And it's not the same vector, but the way the factory is set up is very similar. And that plant has been approved, of course. So the FDA has some comfort that Lonza knows what they're doing when it comes to making vectors. More importantly, this vector is shipped to Bothell and then assembled in Bothell where the finished product is. The FDA could have inspected the raw vector at Bothell and been comfortable with the way the vector looked on the ground there versus needing to actually see how it's manufactured in Houston. Now, yes, that usually is not what they do, to be clear. They need to see a new plant, and they need to see that there's nothing going on, you know, that they can't see that just by looking at the finished product or the raw material of the vector. They need to see whether somebody, you know, is doing something wrong on their desk or whatever, you know. And, you know, that leads me to this question. If you're the FDA and you have to decide next week whether you indefinitely delay this or you approve it not pending, you approve it, but you say that you're going to be doing an inspection of the vector in the future, what kind of risk are you giving the agency for future litigation or for potentially putting a tainted product on the market? So it's extraordinarily unlikely that when this Texas plant is eventually inspected, there's a Form 483 issued that is so bad that the FDA would have decided to CRL this. It is vastly more likely, like to the magnitude of 95%, that whatever issues they find at the Houston facility are rectifiable. It could be like the example she likes to use is like, an airflow issue. Like they need to put in a new, vent or something or duct or whatever. So, and this drug's not going to millions of people. This isn't some small molecule cholesterol drug where if the manufacturing process is tainted, you might, kill people for something that's not a super important life-saving drug. No, this is going to a small number of people that are very, very sick, that, this is their last resort. Now, on the flip side, the FDA can say, well, there's already 2 on the market, and there's no rush to get this to market. As I've said many times, I think this is a differentiated product, and I think the FDA is well aware it's a differentiated product. So, they'd have to come to terms with the fact that by delaying this drug to market, they will be killing people. I mean, it's that simple. The side effects of the other CAR-Ts are more toxic, and on average, it kills 2% of the people that take it. So, it's a 2% death penalty. I think the FDA will do everything in its power to get this approved on time. I think they will. I think they will be proud of it, and I think that it's their incentive to get it done. Now, if we miss it, what happens, and how is it articulated to us? Okay, so Wall Street currently thinks the base case is that they defer. You ask a lot of different people; they think the base case is you defer. How does the FDA communicate what a deferral is? Let's go through the different options. So, does the FDA say we are going to defer, but we are going to still waive inspection? We just need a few more weeks to finish this. I put the odds of that at almost 0%. If the FDA was going to defer, if FDA was going to waive inspection, they're going to get this done by the PDUFA date. They don't need any more time. And it looks bad for them they actually get measured by missing or making PDUFA dates. And the PDUFA date is very important to them, and they're going to make the PDUFA date. So I put the odds of that at 0%, honestly. That we're going to get a press release that says, FDA has changed their mind. No need to inspect. We'll get done with this application in the next few weeks. The next option is FDA tells Bristol Myers, we are going to accept a virtual inspection, and we plan on doing that in the next few weeks. I put the odds of this at very low, but not 0. If the FDA was planning on doing a virtual inspection, I think they would have done it. So that leads me to this news. Next week, there's an annual summit about FDA inspections. I'm going to link it here. And that summit has an agenda that on Tuesday at 12:15, you can open it up. It's the drugs and biologics track. It says, be ready for the FDA drug GMP facility evaluations and inspections during the pandemic. COVID-19 has impacted almost everything about how we do business, including the FDA's ability to conduct inspections. Will the FDA begin to use virtual inspections? If so, how will this be done? Get a handle on the tools the FDA is using to evaluate facilities at a time when traditional inspections are out of the question. And filed under you can't make this shit up, the third panelist is Sarah Barkow, who works for Bristol Myers Squibb and is the manufacturing quality guidance and policy staff. Former manufacturing quality guidance and policy staff from Cedar FDA. Now, FDA is participating in this conference. They're not on this panel though, but they're going to be part of this conference. So clearly the FDA is trying to figure out how to do virtual inspections. And I guess you could take it from reading this that they haven't really figured it out yet. It's my understanding that they have done some virtual inspections though up to now, and I don't know why we think they're going to thread this needle in the next 2 to 3 or 4 weeks and get it done before the end of the year. Don't think 12/31 means a lot to the FDA. They don't care about the CVR, we know that. But getting something done by the year end is not nearly as important as getting it done by the PDUFA date. And there's only 5 or 6 weeks between this PDUFA date and the end of the year. So I give it a very low percentage chance we get that kind of granularity from Bristol Myers, that they press release and say, FDA has said we're going to do virtual inspection and be done next few weeks. So what are the other things they could tell us? They might just say, FDA has said we need to inspect, we can't inspect, and we're going to be working with the FDA to try to get an inspection done, period. If they say that, I think the CVR is crushed, because I don't know why we would believe they can inspect Houston anytime soon if they haven't been able to inspect it the last 6 weeks. And I have no reason why we would believe they're going to do a virtual inspection if the FDA hasn't articulated that to them and Bristol Myers isn't articulating that to us. So I don't think the market would bank on that. And then the final thing the FDA, the Bristol Myers might say to us is the worst outcome, which is we need to inspect, we can't inspect, and we don't believe this will be done by the end of the year. I only think Bristol Myers would say that if the FDA told them in writing. I go back to what Bristol Myers has said over and over again. They only want to tell us the facts. So they're not going to give us any opinions if they think they can get this done or not. They're going to tell us what's in that letter. And if the letter says we need to inspect, we can't inspect, sorry, have a Merry Christmas, then, that's what they're going to tell us. So I don't think a deferral is good for this thing. And I think it trades bad on a deferral. So owning this requires you to believe that the FDA still approves this. They approve it despite Bristol Myers being told they can't approve it. And you just think that the FDA has not been forthcoming about it thus far. It's a hard pill to swallow. And that's the reason why the CVR is $1.20, right? The base case for this is that this is a 0, not that this is $9. My price target on if it gets approved by the PDUFA is still at least $4.50. This is a lot of read-throughs if this gets approved by the PDUFA. Your read-through is that they got it done, of course, by the PDUFA, duh. But it's that ide-cel is actually an unmet need with no other drugs in the market. And outside of a major amendment, which I do not believe is likely, unless you think the FDA is going to go against their mandate and give major amendments just because they can't inspect. That's not what a major amendment is. And I think ide-cel gets done well in advance of its March PDUFA. So you'd have 100% return from $4.50 to $9 on something that I think is extraordinarily high likelihood. So if you go after, so $4.50 on approval, let's say, if you get a deferral, I think it's anywhere between 50 cents and $2. You could be as much as $2 or even $2.50 if they have that great language of the FDA. If the word weeks is in the press release, the FDA plans on finishing this application in the coming weeks. Again, I don't think that's likely they say that, but if they do say that, you could easily go above $2 and maybe even to $3 because weeks is definitely less than 6 weeks. Let's talk about litigation, which is I think a pretty interesting topic here, and then I'll take some questions. So I happen to have a view that litigation is more valuable here than most people do. I think if they get a rejection next week, I don't think there's much litigation value at all. The whole purpose of this CVR was, drugs being approved, you get paid. So unless you think they're going to get sued for gross incompetence, which I guess is possible, I don't really like that avenue. What I do think is interesting here is if we get to 12/31 and we have no decision. It's important to think about this because if you're trying to figure out what your downside here is, you want to know what the CVR is going to trade at come December 31st in a no decision. So it's my belief that if liso-cel gets approved after January 1st and ide-cel gets approved, same thing, anytime in 2021, it could be after March 31st, that there is a decent litigation value here and Bristol Myers will be quick to settle it and just get rid of this situation. So they were going to be on the hook for $9 and $7 billion. And I think a reasonable estimate for what they would settle for and settle, relatively quickly would be somewhere in the $1.50 to $3 range. And in that range, you get a recovery for kind of what the VWAP has been on this security since its inception. It's probably more like $3, by the way, is what the recovery would be for the historical trading price of this stock. The reason why I think they would do this is they have a reputation to uphold. They're a gigantic company. And like I've said many times, employees own this stock, and they might actually be liable. So in a discovery, we would have to find out why this got a major amendment, right? The major amendment caused this to go from August to November. And if we were in an August situation where the FDA had to defer, they might be much more apt to have figured out virtual inspections in the 5 months they had versus the 6 weeks they have now. Not to mention, Houston wasn't as bad come September and October, and they might have went in there. So I think that you have a recovery of somewhere between $1.50 and $3, and this thing might be trading at 25 cents. One person told me it would trade at 1 cent. Another person told me to trade at 10 cents. If it was 25 cents, I would make it probably a 10% position if it hasn't been decided by January 1st. First of all, if it hasn't been decided by January 1st, it's pending approval. So there's no CRL coming. It's just do the inspection and then you get approved. At 25 cents, it would be a six-bagger to me at the low end of my litigation value. And I think Bristol-Myers would settle for $1.50 like that. I mean, they really owed $9, right? And they got off the hook because of COVID. So for $1.50, if they could put this behind them and not worry about discovery, and also giving their employees a little bit of a bone, and giving, they don't care about CVR holders. It's more about their liability and about a little bit about saving face. I think they'll do it. So I think that's a pretty interesting opportunity. And I think you shouldn't underestimate what this will trade at come January 1st. The second thing I wanted to tell you about that is I believe you have to own the CVR through litigation to get paid. So a lot of people think this is like a normal shareholder lawsuit where you don't have to be holding the security when the lawyers actually settle. It's for, this blew up in November. If I owned it through the November, then I'm going to get paid. It's not. It's my understanding that is not correct. This is not like that. A better example I'll give you is if Argentina, defaults in its bonds and you owned them at 100 cents and they're now worth, 5 cents, and you sell them to a vulture investor at 5 cents, and then 5 years later they settle with the fraud of the default. Guess what? The guy that lost 95 cents on the vulture on the debt doesn't get paid a penny. It's the guy that owns them at a nickel. I don't even need to give you that precedent. It's my understanding that the Sanofi litigation for the previous CVR that had exactly the situation happen, it's the people that own the CVR at the end when they settled got paid, not the previous shareholders. So make sure you realize that when you decide what to do with this thing, come tax losses. That also is going to create an interesting wrinkle. A lot of people are going to want to sell us for tax losses in the end of the year. So I hope we don't have to talk about this, but we can always talk about that when the time comes. I think that's about it. Let me see what else I got here on my notes. So as far as odds go, yeah. So I think you're probably at a 10% chance of a CRL. I only say 10% because I can't figure out why they haven't inspected Houston if they, put people into Bothell. It's confusing to me, and I can't minimize the odds of something happening at Bothell. That is the reason why they didn't go into Houston. Remember, in the 10Q, they put a line in that said they don't believe the inspections of the second facility has anything to do with the result of the first facility inspection. I think they did that to say, do not read into the fact they haven't inspected Houston by thinking that Bothell failed. I mean, they put that in there for a reason. So I don't think Bothell failed. So I say less than 10% chance of a CRL. So then what that leaves us with 90%. What the hell happens? I'm probably 40 to 50% chance it gets approved next week, and then 40% chance of a deferral. And in the deferral outcome, it's very hard for me to think it gets done before the end of the year. I would probably be 20 to 25% chance the FDA decides to do a virtual inspection and gets it done by the end of the year, and 75% chance this goes on indefinitely through January 1st. So, all in, if you do 25% on the balance on the 50%, yeah, you get to like probably a 65% chance that this gets approved by year end. So it's trading at $1.20, and I have it probably going 25 cents, maybe even 50 cents, on nothing happening by the end of the year. And I have it going to $4.50 if it gets approved. It will not go to $4.50 if this gets approved between the PDUFA date and the end of the year, because then you're going to have people worried about IDA sell. Though I think that would be a fantastic buying opportunity, and I'll deal with that if that ever happens. but that's neither here nor there. Let's say it goes to $3 in that scenario. Your expected value is like 450 times 50%. Right there, you get the 225 of value just on that scenario alone. And then you get another 25% of 50% chance of a deferral and 25% of chance it's approved worth $3. That's like 75 cents a share of value. So now you're already up to $3 in expected value right there alone. And that's without me giving any salvage value for the end of the year, getting 25 cents of value with the deferral past the first of the year. So clearly, I think it's an interesting situation here. I very much know why it's going down. I mean, this is a binary thing into the end of the year. A lot of pods own this, and they just can't take the binary risk. And you also have to look into the face of defy logic, which is that the FDA has told them they have to inspect, and they haven't inspected. And that brings me to this: if the Bristol Myers was told by the FDA that they were not going to make the PDUFA, even if they were told orally, I think Bristol Myers would have told us in that conference call. I think they would have said, look, FDA has informed us they think that they might miss the PDUFA date. Just that. They might miss it, and they didn't tell us that. In fact, they reiterated the PDUFA date on the conference call, and they even had it in their slideshow. So, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of it. It's never been more perplexed in my life. And this one is just so complicated. This is so weird. I don't see anybody asking a single question. There must be something broken in the chat, I'm guessing. Anybody just want to test it? Can't figure out why I can't see anything. You could tweet at me if you want, at given2tweet, GIVEN, the number 2, TWEET. I'll check Twitter right now to see what questions you have. So someone just told me I'm not necessarily right. If this does get settled in litigation, it's all over the map. It could potentially be paid out to people that owned it in the past. Okay, I guess that's fair. I mean, to me, that just seems like a huge, clusterfuck. If the thing's still trading, or even if the thing stops trading, I think it's the people that own it at the halt versus trying to figure out at what point of time this year you get paid for it. I mean, this thing blew up like 6 times this year. So I don't know how you possibly come up with what the fair value is of a settlement from a blow up perspective. But I just want to throw that out there because I was told that by somebody. Any other questions here? I don't see any questions still. I'll give you guys 2 minutes to tweet at me any questions. GIVEN, the number 2, tweet, TWEET. Dr. Hand's comments on Monday could read through very bullish for an on-time approval without Texas inspections. Who is Dr. Hand? That's an FDA official? I don't remember what he said on Monday. So someone would have to remind me. Was he interviewed about something? Oh, here are some questions. Thank you. Thank you, Tejada. Never thought I'd be saying that. What if virtual inspection in Houston is happening right now? How can you rule this out? So I don't know why. I can't rule it out, but I don't know why they, again, would have waited until the absolute last minute to do a virtual inspection. They had the entire month between Bothell and Bristol Myers earnings date, and they didn't do the virtual inspection that month. So it doesn't make any sense to me why they would say, you know what, let's just do this virtual inspection that doesn't have any risk to our employees on the 11th hour, 2 minutes before approval, when, by the way, you can still get Form 483s and you still have to respond to them. Now, they did inspect a facility in Europe in July, at the end of July, and approved the drug 2 to 3 weeks later. So it is possible to do an inspection very closely and then still approve. So could it be happening? Sure. If you talk to Bristol Myers Investor Relations, they're either the best poker players of all time, or they don't know what's happening. I believe, so this is another good question people ask me. I believe Bristol Myers Investor Relations is very, very in the know here. I think that there's 2 people that work there, And one of them, I think, is at the very least is involved in all the meetings that are going on regarding the CVR. This is a very weird situation for Bristol Myers. They don't really care at all about the outcome of this PDUFA date outside of the CVR. It's immaterial to them. And I think that the investor relations guys have been involved in all of the communications and deciding what to disclose to the market with lawyers. So they'd have to be really playing a hell of a poker game if, this week a virtual inspection's happening. Because if you speak to investor relations, you sure don't get a warm and fuzzy feeling that Bristol Myers is expecting an on-time approval next week. You just don't get it. Now, that jives with what I think, which is that FDA has not told Bristol Myers, that they're going to get an on-time approval next week. So that's my answer to that. It might also be a failed inspection in Washington. Yes, but I discussed that, why I think that's unlikely. And especially because they said that in the 10Q that one inspection has nothing to do with the other. Tell us what you think about the SPPI a little more. FDA deferred South Korea, and it was a non-inferior and non-breakthrough designation. Yeah, Tejada, you can go look at my previous YouTube from yesterday or 2 days ago. I go into detail about that. I don't think there's a very good read through at all there. It was not a important product at all, like you just said. It was in South Korea where they legit could not go to. There's a 2-week quarantine, and I don't think the drug's important. So I think the FDA has to defer on some drugs, right? They can't say every drug that we can't inspect is going to be approved, or else it's kind of like letting the asylums run the prison. So I don't think it's possible that they're just going to let every drug through. I think this drug is different, and I think that the headline risk for FDA is just huge. I mean, I definitely think come January, an article would be written in the Washington Post that says FDA refuses to bring a drug to market that they actually have already inspected the main plant and has probably already inspected the ingredient at the main plant, but just because of bureaucracy refuses to let this drug be given to patients. Let's see what else we got here. More questions. Okay, hold on one second. Oh, wow. A lot of questions. Great. There was also a recent article that EUA vaccines won't require inspections. So that's even more evidence that the vaccine taking research argument is invalid. That's correct. Yep. The article came out that said that that Lonza, which actually makes some of the vaccine stuff in a New Jersey plant, would not have to be inspected there for emergency authorization. So Aaron's absolutely right. It seems likely that inspections of vaccine plants is definitely not what's holding this up. Hey, Matt, thanks to you and Sheep of Wall Street for all the great work you've been doing. You're welcome. Thanks, Matt. Nice jacket. Thank you very much. This is Lonza's only U.S. vector facility. The other vectors must be manufactured in Europe. Richard, that's correct. It's my understanding that it's a European facility that manufactures the other CAR T. But still, it would be an FDA-approved facility, because it's currently producing commercial output. How does the CGMP designation, which the Lonza plant supposedly has, play into this? Another good question. If you go to a website, I don't have the link for this handy, I don't think, but this is really cool. Someone found this on Twitter. The architect that built the Lonza Houston facility has a page where it says this is an FDA-approved facility. Whatever the hell that means, I don't know, but it says it on their page. Now, they might be referring to the fact that it's a CGMP. I don't know what any of this stuff means, by the way, guys. I don't know what the hell CGMP is. No idea. But I do think it means that FDA has, in some manner, blessed this facility, or else it wouldn't be called an FDA-approved facility. So the FDA, while there is no approved drug, commercial drug at this facility, they have, in some manner, inspected this facility. I don't know what that means, but that could give FDA comfort that the facility is kosher enough to let this go by. This is going to be a small number of people. Is that really a relevant factor? The hurdle isn't lower depending on potential patient population size, is it? It actually is, Richard, I think. Yes, the FDA will tell you that safety and efficacy are just a balancing measure, but a better way to look at it is this. So the vaccine's a perfect way to look at it. So they're not going to give the vaccine to millions and millions and millions of people if there is even a small, chance that there's a major side effect from this vaccine, whether it's because of the vaccine itself or because of the manufacturing problems or whatever. Because the risk benefit isn't there, right? No one's going to take a vaccine to not get COVID, especially if you're under the age of 40, if there's a, even a 0.1% chance of dying from it. Further, the FDA knows this drug is going to very, very sick patients. So they're willing to take more of a risk, either from a manufacturing perspective or from a safety profile perspective for these patients versus some, in the past, FDA has had huge scandals with drugs that had to be recalled that, millions of people got, and then people died from them. So it's not possible for this to happen here. I mean, there's no risk. There's no headline here risk for FDA, where 2 years from now we find out, there was rat poison in the vector, and the FDA shouldn't have approved this without inspecting. So they're definitely looking at what's the least way we look bad in the future, and all signs there point to approving this. I mean, if there's incentives, it's FDA approving this on time. Tejada, would you be willing to update us? I have to go to the next page. I don't know what that says. If it significantly happens and go to 0, if approval for Lysocell is early 21, what do you think that means? I don't know. Oh, for Idacel, I think you're saying? I'll talk about it when the time comes. If Lysocell gets delayed, I still think Idacel would be approved early or on time. I like your quote. A recovery of $3 in litigation would be reduced by legal fees, right? No, I think that would be what we would get. We're not, and also you're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of legal fees. It's probably in the tens of millions of dollars range. I mean, remember, this is a $7 billion security. So yeah, I'm not too worried about the lawyers getting half of it, like in a typical class action lawsuit. Nice coat, and everybody likes the coat. I've had this coat for like 15 years. Nice coat. That Lonza plant has never been inspected. How seriously does this impair the odds here? Well, I kind of talked about that. I mean, basically, it's never been inspected for an approved drug, and it's rare for that to happen to get approval. But this isn't normal times. So the FDA can say that Lonza is a very sophisticated organization, and they make a similar vector in another plant. Further, they can say that they inspected the vector in Bothell, and maybe they even did some form of virtual inspection when they were in Bothell. So I think that they have a lot of outs with getting away without actually inspecting here. 5 letters in a ticker and I'm out. That's probably good advice. I ended up with 25 loss on investment. Shooter's got to shoot. No idea what any of that means. Matt, there are more than 20 PDUFA dates between now and 12/31/20. Even if 50% of those don't need inspections, doesn't the FDA need to start allowing virtual inspections as a policy soon so they don't miss dozens of dates? It's a great question. I think that if you look since COVID started in March, FDA has made almost every PDUFA date, right? It's only deferred. It's CRL the drug in June because they couldn't inspect a European plant that previously had problems. Okay, it deferred a drug because of South Korea, and now we're being told that they might also have to defer another drug in a few weeks. I don't think there's as many drugs as you think that the FDA thinks we have to inspect. They only have to inspect when it's a brand new plant, and the procedures, I think, for the plant it's more of a complex process. So I wouldn't read in so much to the fact that the PDUFA dates are piling up and they need to figure this out. They do need to figure this out, though. They do need to figure out COVID's not going anywhere, and it's only going to get worse in January and February. So do I think that Lysocell will eventually be approved and might be approved via virtual inspection? The answer is yes. Do I think that is likely to happen in the 5 weeks after the PDUFA date when they couldn't come up with a way to do it in the last 6 weeks, and they sent someone to Bothell in the beginning of October but still didn't have a plan? It just seems very far-fetched to me, right? But look, we'll deal with that when the time comes. I mean, you don't have to play for that right now. You need to play for whether you think the FDA is going to communicate that to Bristol and whether Bristol is going to tell us. And Bristol has only showed us one thing so far. They like telling us bad news, and they don't like, hand-holding with the CVR. So I put low odds at a hand-holding situation. Why not just buy this after the November 16, 17 deadline at $3 to $4? Will you increase your position at that point? Okay, those are great questions. So I've looked at this CVR as discrete trades all along the way, okay? And I've gotten a lot of them wrong, and I've gotten a lot of them right. And I've lost money overall, of course, based on this last blow up. My average price all in is like probably $290, something like that. I think it's a good trade going into this week, next week, right? Do I think it's a better trade, once they approve on time? Yes. I think that at 3, 4, 450 is a better trade than it probably is today. But I think they're both incredibly positive expected value. And if they're both incredibly positive expected value, then why would I be on the sidelines today and just own it starting next week? I wouldn't. I won't increase my position next week because it's going to be huge, right? I mean, right now I'm in double-digit position of percent of my portfolio. And in the past, I was basically I had a near 50% position in this going into the blow-up last week. In the past, my goal was to cut it after LisoCell and still own it big, but own it much smaller into IdaCell. I can make a reasonable argument to where I will not sell any of this come post-LisoCell if this gets approved on time. I'll be that confident that IdaCell gets approved on time. But again, I'll discuss that when the time comes. Any other questions? I'll figure out the chat next time, guys. Sorry about that. And thank you, Tejada, for tweeting the chat questions at me. Anybody else want to send the chat questions to me? I'm not going to sign off until I get the last screenshot if you guys have any other questions. Here's Dr. Hand's remarks from the 2020 virtual conference. Interesting. I did not see this. It's from November 9th. I mean, yeah, he's going out of his way to say, oh, here we go. There's someone highlighted for me here. As you know, in March, the FDA postponed on-site domestic and foreign routine surveillance inspections due to concerns around the pandemic. Although FDA investigators have continued to conduct mission-critical inspections, both domestically and abroad, along with other activities, and are meeting applicable FDA requirements. In July, we resumed prioritized domestic surveillance inspections, and we're using all available tools and resources to support regulatory decisions on applications that include sites impacted by FDA's ability to inspect due to COVID-19. CDER and CBER are continuing to evaluate applications, strategically applying a holistic approach in the decision-making process to determine if an inspection is warranted or if an inspection is no longer needed due to information gained through the use of additional tools mentioned above. I mean, yeah, that's like really, fucking bullish, right? I mean, he's going to go out there, and I'll tweet this link if this even works. He's going to go out there and tell the world that we will not miss PDUFA dates because of inspections, especially for mission-critical drugs, and then miss a PDUFA date next week? I mean, does that make any sense? And why did they send someone into Bothell if they weren't planning on getting this done on time? So, look, the most logical outcome is they're waiving the inspection, and they're approving this on time, okay? And when it happens, we're all gonna be like, well, duh, And then, of course, if it doesn't happen, we're gonna say, well, duh. So this is gonna be a shitty situation either way, whether it gets approved or it doesn't, because it's really just a clusterfuck. But yeah, that's incredibly bullish. He looks like an idiot for saying that. And you can't get any more mission critical than a breakthrough designation oncology drug that's the last thing you do to treat COVID patients. Let me see what happens if I pull up the YouTube here. I have an idea. I think I know why I can't see questions. I see questions now. If LisoCell gets conditional approval, do you think BMI would litigate for not receiving full approval by the required date? They wouldn't get conditional approval. I mean, you're saying like accelerated approval? No. That's considered approval. You could sell it as commercial, and no, I don't believe that. I don't think FDA is going to give conditional approval. I think FDA would just give it approval, and then they say they're waiting inspection. CGMP only means they are approved for sterile pharma grade production. Now they want to review and observe the full process of production. Got it. Well, it's good to know that they have inspected it for something. I didn't even know they were CGMP certified. I don't know what that is. The code is from H&M, no? I have the same one. Two of them, actually. The other is dark brown. No, the code is Xenia. Yeah. I think I've covered everything. I'm now on the chat. What other questions you guys got? Anything? These great questions. If lysosol is approved next week, what risks are there holding until the new tax year? That's a great question. Tejada would love to answer this one. I don't mean that as a joke. I'm serious. Tejada will tell you that you have a major amendment risk with Idacel. And if you do the same math from when Lysocell got the major amendment, how many months it was prior to its PDUFA date, you are squarely in. You could get fucked on Idacel major amendment territory in the month of December. Now, I put those odds at a very low number because most major amendments don't happen until the weeks prior to the PDUFA. It's very rare to happen 4 months early. And we'll never know exactly why that happened with Lysocell. It speaks to the fact that Bristol Myers probably messed up the application, not on purpose, but they probably left out a ton of documentation, just like they did with Idacel. And that's the reason why the major amendment happened so soon. So I think if you could feel pretty comfortable holding this till January 1st, if you want to take the capital gains in January. That's my personal belief. Do you think BMY will see even a smallish move on the CVR blowing up? I mean, yeah, it's worth $7 billion to them. The Lysocell NPV is probably 1 billion, maybe, and it's not even dead. If it's just a deferral, then they're going to get approved at some point. What's 7 billion into what is it, 130 or 140 billion? It should go up a few percent. Yeah. 3%, 2%, 4%. It's a lot of cash. The whole thing's rather sad. All right, are we good? This was fun, like always. I will do another one tomorrow if we have to. I don't think I'll do another one. I currently have no plans to trade this thing anymore. I did end up selling a small amount yesterday, and my current position is virtually the same as it was going into the blow up last week. So I have probably 10% less than the number of shares. So virtually the same position size. The last time I talked to you guys, I said I added 10%. So I reversed it. Basically every day I have different feelings about this, and I'm sizing it based on this goes to zero and how much my account's value will be after that, and being very comfortable with being able to manage my account as a going concern going forward. This is what I do for a living. So I just manage my own Interactive Brokers account. I have no other cash flow and no job. So I am comfortable with that. And all of you should also be comfortable with that. You should definitely expect this to be a zero, as you always should have. And size it accordingly based on it being a zero. That should be obvious. Let's see what we got here. Any other ones? Here is one for you in sheep. Trill. Oh, you're giving me stock advice. I don't need any stock advice right now. Here is the 10Q statement. Any delay in the timing of approval could reduce the resale price of the CVRs. If there's a significant delay that extends the FDA's review period beyond December 31st, no payment will be made and the CVRs will expire with that value. Yeah, Tara, that doesn't bother me. I mean, of course they're going to say that. I think there's less than a 1% chance they voluntarily extend the deadline, okay? Most people are at 0%. All I'm saying is that there'll be litigation and they'll settle it in the summer, or sometime next year. It might take a year to get this behind them. But no, they have to tell you that, because that's what the CVR says. That's what the terms of the CVR are, that if this slips past December 31st, it's out of their control and they're not going to pay it out. All right. I'm going to log off. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care.